Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we bring you stories that captivate the imagination and inspire the soul. Today's story is one of hidden strength, justice, and the truth that appearances can be deceiving. It begins in a quiet, rural gas station, where an unassuming janitor's night takes a dangerous turn as a rowdy biker gang storms in. But what unfolds will shock you, revealing a story of bravery, cunning, and a twist that will leave you speechless. Stay with us as we explore an unforgettable tale about standing tall in the face of adversity, the pursuit of justice, and the legacy of a life dedicated to duty. If you love stories with unexpected twists and moments that stay with you long after they're over, be sure to leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an inspiring story from Hopeful Horizon. And we'd love to know, where are you listening from today? The fluorescent lights of the rural gas station flickered faintly, casting long shadows across the worn tiles of the floor. Carl stood by the counter, quietly humming an old tune as he refilled the coffee machine. His movements were deliberate, methodical, and calm, much like the man himself. Though his hunched posture and slow gait made him seem like just another elderly janitor, his sharp, observant eyes told a different story. Carl noticed everything: the squeak of a door hinge, the scuff marks on the floor, the soft shuffle of a trucker's boots. Nothing escaped him, even if he didn't let on. It was nearing midnight, the time when the station was usually quiet, save for the occasional weary traveler. But tonight, the peaceful monotony was shattered by the deafening roar of motorcycle engines. Carl glanced up, his face impassive, as the gang pulled into the parking lot. 5 bikers dismounted, their boots crunching on the gravel as they swaggered toward the entrance. The leader, a tall, burly man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, pushed open the door with unnecessary force. His leather vest was adorned with patches and skull insignias, and his presence exuded a brash, intimidating confidence. Behind him trailed his gang, each man just as rough and unruly. Snake's gaze swept over the gas station, landing briefly on the cashier, a young woman named Jenny, who froze like a deer in headlights. Carl's eyes flickered to Jenny, then back to the gang. He kept his hands steady, continuing to clean the counter as the men stomped in. "Well, well," Snake drawled, his voice carrying over the hum of the refrigerators. "What a fine little establishment you've got here." The other bikers chuckled, their laughter coarse and mean. One of them, a wiry man with a patchy beard, knocked over a display of candy bars, sending them clattering to the floor. Carl didn't react. Instead, he picked up his mop and quietly began cleaning the mess. "Hey, old man," Snake called out, noticing Carl for the first time. "What's with the mop? You planning to clean up after us?" The gang erupted into laughter, but Carl didn't respond. He simply continued his work, his expression unreadable. His calm demeanor seemed to annoy Snake, who strode over and deliberately spilled a cup of coffee onto the freshly mopped floor. "Oops," Snake said with a mocking grin. "Looks like you missed a spot." Carl glanced at the spill, then at Snake. Without a word, he adjusted his mop and began cleaning again. The quiet resilience in his actions only seemed to rile Snake further. He leaned in closer, his voice a low growl. "You got something to say, old man?" Carl paused for a moment, his grip on the mop tightening slightly. But instead of responding, he simply resumed his task, moving to a different section of the floor. Snake's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Meanwhile, the other bikers were causing havoc, knocking over shelves and intimidating the few remaining customers. Jenny's hands shook as she pretended to organize the counter, her eyes darting nervously to Carl. She'd seen him handle difficult customers before, always with quiet authority. But this was different. Snake regrouped with his gang, loudly discussing their next move. Carl overheard every word, his sharp hearing picking up their crude jokes and plans. They spoke openly, confident that no one would dare challenge them. Snake's voice lowered as he mentioned robbing the station, and Carl's ears perked up. "Cash registers right there," Snake said, nodding toward Jenny. "Let's see what the little miss has got tucked away." Carl's eyes narrowed, though his face remained neutral. He adjusted his grip on the mop handle, his fingers brushing against a small hidden notch. The air seemed to grow heavier as he positioned himself near the gang, his movements unhurried but deliberate. The stage was set, and Carl was ready for what was to come. The tension in the gas station was palpable as the bikers made their move. Snake sauntered up to the counter, slapping his palm down with a loud thud that made Jenny jump. "All right, sweetheart," he said, his grin wide and menacing. "Empty the register. Now." Jenny's hands trembled as she fumbled with the keys, her face pale. The other bikers fanned out, keeping an eye on the few remaining customers and vandalizing the store for good measure. One of them, a stocky man with a shaved head, picked up a bottle of soda and smashed it against the wall, laughing as the liquid splattered everywhere. Carl watched from a corner, his mop poised like a staff. He appeared calm, almost detached, but his eyes tracked every movement, analyzing the bikers' positions and behaviors. Snake leaned closer to Jenny, his voice a low threat. "Hurry up, darling. I don't have all night." Jenny's fingers fumbled as she tried to open the register. Tears welled up in her eyes and her breathing quickened. One of the bikers, a lanky man with a scar across his cheek, sneered and reached out to grab her wrist. That's when Carl moved. With a swift, precise motion, he swung the mop handle, striking the biker's hand and forcing him to let go. The man yelped, clutching his wrist, and spun around to face Carl. "What the hell?" he snarled. Carl didn't answer. He adjusted his stance, holding the mop like a weapon. The room seemed to freeze for a moment as everyone turned to stare at the old janitor. Snake's grin faltered, replaced by a scowl. "You've got some nerve, old man." Carl didn't blink. "Let her go," he said quietly, his voice steady. The stocky biker lunged at Carl, but the old man sidestepped with surprising agility, using the mop to trip him. The biker crashed to the floor, cursing loudly. Another gang member tried to intervene, but Carl spun the mop like a martial artist, striking him in the knee and sending him stumbling backward. The customers watched in stunned silence, their fear momentarily replaced by awe. Carl moved with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime training for moments like this. Each motion was calculated, efficient, and effective. Snake's face twisted in anger as he pulled a knife from his belt. He approached Carl slowly, his movements predatory. "Who are you, old man?" Snake sneered, the blade glinting under the fluorescent lights. Carl's grip on the mop tightened. His eyes, normally calm and kind, now burned with an intensity that made Snake hesitate. "You're about to find out," Carl said, his voice low and firm. Snake lunged, slashing the knife toward Carl, but the janitor was ready. With a swift, practiced motion, he used the mop handle to deflect the blade and disarm Snake, sending the knife skittering across the floor. The gang leader's confidence shattered as Carl pinned him against the counter with the mop handle pressed against his chest. "Enough," Carl said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The bikers froze, their bravado replaced by uncertainty. For the first time that night, they realized they were no longer in control. Carl stepped back, keeping his eyes on Snake, and reached for a zip tie from the utility closet. "Everyone on the ground," Carl commanded, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. One by one, the bikers complied, their earlier arrogance replaced by fear. As Carl secured their hands with zip ties, he pulled out a small, discreet communication device from his pocket. "This is Walker," he said into the device, his voice calm and professional. "Situation contained, requesting local law enforcement." Jenny stared at him, her mouth agape. "Who are you?" she whispered. Carl gave her a faint smile. "Just a janitor," he replied. But his eyes, sharp and knowing, told a different story entirely. Snake lunged at Carl, the knife flashing under the harsh fluorescent lights. But Carl's calm demeanor didn't waver. With a swift motion, Carl sidestepped the attack, grabbing Snake's wrist and twisting it in a fluid movement. The knife clattered to the floor, and Snake cried out in pain. Before the gang leader could react further, Carl maneuvered him into a headlock and pushed him against the wall, pinning him effortlessly. The remaining bikers, momentarily stunned, charged at Carl, but he was ready. Grabbing the mop bucket, he sent a stream of soapy water onto the floor, causing two bikers to lose their footing. As they stumbled, Carl used the mop handle to trip one and jabbed the other in the stomach. Each movement was precise, economical, and shockingly effective. The two bikers Carl had taken down earlier began to stir. Without hesitation, Carl grabbed zip ties from a nearby utility closet and bound their wrists together behind their backs. His actions were methodical, his grip firm but not cruel. Snake, still struggling against Carl's grip, spat venomously. "Who the hell are you, old man?" Carl tightened his hold for a moment before answering. "Just someone who's tired of cleaning up after people like you." He released Snake briefly, only to expertly restrain him using another zip tie. The gang leader writhed and cursed, his bravado fading as the realization of Carl's capabilities set in. From his pocket, Carl retrieved a small, discreet communication device. He pressed a button and spoke with measured authority. "This is Walker. Send units to the gas station. Situation contained." The bikers exchanged confused glances, their arrogance dissolving into unease. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens broke the tense silence. Police cars screeched to a halt outside, their lights flashing blue and red. Officers poured in, guns drawn, but immediately lowered them upon seeing Carl. One officer, a grizzled man with a captain's insignia, approached Carl with respect. "Agent Walker," he said, nodding. "Good to see you again. Looks like you've been busy." Carl gave a curt nod in return. "Had some unexpected visitors. They've been causing trouble for more than just me tonight." The bikers' confusion turned to shock as they processed the exchange. "Agent?" Snake sneered, though his voice wavered. "You expect us to believe this guy's some kind of secret cop?" Carl didn't bother responding. Instead, he handed a small flash drive to the captain. "Everything's on here. Their activities, associates, and locations of interest. This isn't just a gang. They're connected to a larger smuggling ring operating in the area." Snake's face went pale. You've been watching us?" Carl finally turned to him, his piercing gaze freezing Snake in place. "Every move you've made since you set up shop in this county." The officers began cuffing the bikers and escorting them to the waiting patrol cars. As Snake was pushed into the back seat of a cruiser, he overheard Carl speaking to the captain. "This wasn't the big fish," Carl said. "Let's see what these minnows lead us to." Snake's protests were drowned out as the car door slammed shut. The next morning, news of the gas station showdown spread like wildfire. Locals gathered outside the station, some curious, others grateful. Carl, as always, kept a low profile, brushing off the attention as he wiped down the counters and restocked shelves. "Carl, you're a hero," a middle-aged woman gushed as she placed her morning coffee on the counter. "I heard what you did last night. You saved lives." Carl offered a small smile. "Just doing my job, ma'am. Coffee's on the house today." The woman beamed and hurried out, spreading the news to more curious onlookers. Later that afternoon, the police captain returned to the station, a satisfied expression on his face. "We raided the warehouse this morning," he said, placing a folder on the counter. "Found enough evidence to put a lot of bad people away for a long time. Couldn't have done it without you, Walker." Carl nodded, flipping through the photos in the folder. Images of confiscated weapons, cash, and contraband filled the pages. "Good work, Captain. This town deserves some peace." The captain hesitated before speaking again. "You ever think about coming back? Full time, I mean. We could use someone like you." Carl's expression softened. "I appreciate it, but this is where I need to be right now." The captain seemed to understand and didn't press further. "Well, if you ever change your mind, you know where to find us." That evening, Carl sat in the small break room, sipping a cup of coffee and gazing at an old photograph pinned to the bulletin board. It was a picture of his late wife, smiling in front of the gas station when it first opened decades ago. The nostalgia in his eyes was tinged with sorrow, but also a quiet resolve. For Carl, the janitor job wasn't just a cover, it was a way to honor her memory. She had loved this town, its quirks, and its people. Working here allowed him to stay connected to her and to the sense of duty that had defined his life. As night fell, the gas station settled into its usual rhythm. A new customer, a young man in a leather jacket, walked in and glanced around. "Nice place," he said, grabbing a bottle of water. "Quiet." Carl smiled faintly as he rang him up. We keep it that way. The man chuckled and left, leaving Carl alone in the stillness. He grabbed his mop and began cleaning the floor, the familiar motions grounding him. Outside, the stars sparkled in the clear night sky, and the neon sign of the gas station buzzed softly. To passers-by, it was just another ordinary night. But for Carl, it was another step in a life spent quietly making the world a safer place, one small act at a time. Thank you for joining us on this thrilling journey of resilience, justice, and the enduring spirit of a man who refuses to let injustice go unchecked. Carl's story reminds us that true strength often lies beneath the surface, and that courage can reveal itself in the most unexpected ways. If this story has inspired you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another impactful tale. And, of course, let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'll be back soon with more stories that challenge the mind, touch the heart, and leave you inspired. Thank you for being part of the Hopeful Horizon community. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay inspired, and remember, it's never too late to stand up for what's right.